News from today's sessions of the Supreme Soviets of Azerbaijan, Ukraine, Russia, and Moldova. In Pridnestrov, a ceasefire agreement is in effect. New information on the accident on the Moscow-Riga railway. Russia will become a founding member of the Union of Baltic Sea States. A report from Copenhagen. A report from the Mideast peace negotiations in Washington. Good evening. Those are today's main news stories. Now more detailed information. We can say that today in the CIS countries was a big parliamentary day. In Baku, the extraordinary session of the Azerbaijani Supreme Soviet was opened. The political situation in that republic is still very complex. A new Supreme Soviet chairman was chosen today. A moment of silence was observed by the deputies in memory of the victims of the tragedy in Khojaly. The announcement by the chairman of the Republic's Supreme Soviet, Kafarov, that he will resign for health reasons came as a surprise to many deputies. An election was held to choose a new parliamentary leader. Yagot Mamedov, a member of the Azerbaijani Academy of Sciences and the dean of the Azerbaijani Medicinal Institute, who was the only candidate, was elected. The session was held at the initiative of the National Council because of the situation in Nagorno-Karabakh and the regions bordering Armenia. The deputies will also discuss the social and political situation in the republics. An analysis of the conflict with Armenia was made by the republic's president, Ayaz Mutalibov, in his speech. He emphasized the need to mobilize all resources to guarantee that Azerbaijani borders remain inviolable and intact. Ayaz Mutalibov expressed his belief in the need to create a regular national army. The president's report caused controversy. The parliamentary session was accompanied by a meeting outside organized by the opposition to demand the resignation of the republic's leadership. We will present more detailed information on the situation in Nagorno-Karabakh a little later in the broadcast. Now I would like to direct your attention to the fact that Ukrainian President Leonid Kravchuk proposed today at a session of the Republican Supreme Soviet to declare a state of economical emergency for the entire year of 1992. The president noted that today the main task, and it is impossible to dispute this, is to stop the political games which worsen the situation. The square before the Ukrainian parliament was unexpectedly empty this morning. To the honor of the peasants, despite their tradition, they did not abandon their farms and fields last fall, and did not come here with posters to remind the deputies of the importance of the issues on the agenda. Now, as well, they are honorably carrying out the spring work in the fields, even if there is no fuel, shortage of seeds or fertilizer, no spare parts, and to buy a new combine for millions of rubles, a whole collective farm would have to work for an entire year. President Kravchuk spoke. He said that rural issues must be dealt with comprehensively because not only agriculture is in decline today. It seems somewhat unexpected for many deputies that the President proposed to the Supreme Soviet to adopt a decree on the introduction of a state of economic emergency in Ukraine until the end of 1992. This would suspend the force of several laws which require large expenditures of money to enforce. The vote on this proposition by the President was postponed. It is not easy to report the whole full agenda of the Republican Supreme Soviet in Russia, so here is a short summary of the deputies' work today. They adopted a law on security, discussed the message of President Boris Yeltsin on reconsideration of the law on local and regional councils of people's deputies and regional administration. This law is awaited impatiently because it is the legal basis for conducting local economic reform. The main item today, however, was that the Russian Supreme Soviet adopted an appeal to the People's Supreme Soviet and President of Tatarstan, motivated by the deputies' concern over the recent events there, which threatened to unleash inter-ethnic conflict in the Republic and to destroy the Russian Federation. The appeal says in part, "The Russian Federation Supreme Soviet believes that the people and the highest organs of state authority in Tatarstan will make a decision and display the wisdom which will allow all of us, effectively and without causing harm to one another, to bring to life our historical mission of radical economic transformation and creation of a democratic Russian Federation as a unified country of free and sovereign states. In Chisinau, the Supreme Soviet of the Moldovan Republic has renewed its work. As was expected, the main attention was given to the events in Dubasari. Both conflicting sides declared the need to solve the conflict by means of peaceful political negotiation, but this is at the level of politicians. However, despite the continuing negotiations in the Republic, the mood is growing to resolve conflicts by force. Our correspondent reports from Chisinau and Dubasari. At the session, the Moldovan President Snegur reported on the results of his trips to the United States, Canada, Finland, and Holland, and his participation in meetings at the UN. He emphasized that the main result of these meetings was the acceptance of Moldova as an equal member of the United Nations and the establishment of diplomatic relations with these countries. The President devoted attention to the situation in Pridnestrov. He informed the deputies upon his return to the Republic, he took a series of steps to control the conflict in Dubasari. He held a meeting with Smirnov, one leader of Pridnestrov, and reached agreement to halt all hostile activities there. But there is still no agreement reached on the fundamental issues of the crisis. Today, the head of the Moldovan state sent a telegram to Boris Yeltsin and Ruslan Khasbalatov in which he expressed his protest about the interference of Cossacks in the Republic's internal affairs. The president repeated his intention to resolve all conflicts by peaceful political means. The Moldovan parliament adopted 2 appeals to the Russian Federation Supreme Soviet and to the Ukrainian parliament. They contain an appeal to assist in the regulation of the conflict on the west bank of the Dniester, the observance of laws, and the territorial integrity of Moldova. A conference commission agreed to establish direct communication links between Chisinau and Tiraspol, and also to consider exchanging prisoners by each side and a withdrawal of armed forces from the battle zone. However, the tension is not being reduced in the area. Literally 15 minutes after the signing of the documents, and this was not yet known in Dubasari, a driver of a municipal electrical service was critically wounded by a shot fired into his car. He died later in the hospital. Shots were heard in the village of Kachieri. This is the territory where the Regiment of Civil Defense of the 14th Army of the CIS Armed Forces used to be. It's now occupied by supporters of the Moldovan Popular Front and local residents who have taken the arms from the regiment. Today, a new fact became known. During the seizure of arms and equipment of the regiment, a special vehicle carrying a container holding radioactive cesium was stolen from the chemical weapons arsenal. For several hours, the military did not know its whereabouts, then discovered it and returned it to the unit. The condition of the container is unknown. The capsules containing the deadly radioactive substance are unknown at this hour. Let's hope they're still intact. And the bloodshed continues in Nagorno-Karabakh. As always, contradictory information is coming in. Azerinform news agency reports that shooting on the Azerbaijani village of Serkhavan in Nagorno-Karabakh, which began by Armenian units last night, continued until this morning. About 10 are dead, many are wounded. But the attempt by Armenian units this morning to seize the village were repulsed. The Armen Press news agency reports from the Armenian Defense Ministry that according to preliminary data, 11 were killed and 13 wounded in the village of Kazanchi in Nagorno-Karabakh as a result of an attempt by Azerbaijani forces to take it by storm. In the area where the 366th Motor Rifle Regiment was deployed in Stepanakert-Khankendi, self-defense forces of Nagorno-Karabakh are taking up positions. This was reported to the Interfax correspondent by the acting chief of the CIS Armed Forces Press Service, Nikolai Medvedev. According to him, these armed units are trying to prevent the withdrawal of the regiment by blocking the roads. At the same time, the Minister of Defense of the Azerbaijani Republic, Gusein Sadikov, told a press conference at the United Nations today about a plan to regulate the peace in Nagorno-Karabakh. He said this plan will be presented in the near future to the UN Security Council. Economic news. In the city of Timirtau in Karaganda region, the leaders of the metallurgical enterprises of Russia and Kazakhstan have gathered to discuss further cooperation. The Karaganda metallurgical factory in the city of Timirtau is one of the leading factories of the branch. Thousands of agreements and mutual deliveries link this Kazakhstan factory with the other republics of the former Soviet Union. If even one link is lost, it would cause the severe disruption along the entire technological chain. The producers have gathered here at this factory to discuss how to preserve the existing links as the Union is divided into independent republics, and the economy exists within tight political borders. The meeting was held by the first Deputy Prime Minister of Kazakhstan, the Minister of Industry, Saskayets. The participants of the meeting developed and adopted a document in which, at the first stage of creating a market, they propose to unify the enterprises which are linked by technology along with their material and technical supply routes. This will be the basis for forming an interbranch and transnational corporation. This development will be presented for consideration to the governments of Russia and Kazakhstan. The current time is sometimes compared with NEP, the revival of private enterprise. It is a revival in certain senses. All layers of the population have begun to engage in entrepreneurial activity. The Data News Agency reports the results of its latest poll, which shows that 30% of Russian residents would like to open their own business, but only 3% are taking practical steps toward this. That is 10 times less than the number of future businessmen. Do you want to open your own business? Yes. Yes, I'd like to. What kind? I don't know. There are different kinds. Do you want to... Are you taking practical steps? No, not now. Would you like to become an entrepreneur or open your own business? I would like to, but I don't have the resources now. It's impossible to say now. I don't know what area I'd like to do business in. I should begin as a middleman, I guess. Mediation activity in food establishments are the most popular form among people who want to start their own business. We're traveling around making agreements, sending food back, and trading. So everyone wants to trade and engage in commercial activity, but who will produce things? The trade workers in the Kuzbas region believe that the labor collective's interests will be infringed during the process of privatization. The strike by trade workers here in Kuzbas was postponed until March 5th. Today, the fate of privatization of the trade enterprises was to be decided. The laborers believed that their interests would be infringed during privatization. The paradox is that both profitable and unprofitable stores are threatening to strike now. They believe that local authorities, through rents and taxes, are trying to break the back of trade and sell it off to the so-called mafia. The possible strikers' opinion about it depends on the position they occupy. The expected government delegation did not arrive here today. The Federation of Kuzbas Trade Unions several hours ago appealed to the labor collectives of the area to hold an hour-long warning strike tomorrow, March 6th. According to preliminary indications, the workers in the budget, trade, medicine, communications, and passenger transport areas will participate. Their main demands are salary increases up to the level of miners' salaries. So social tension continues to increase in the Kuzbas. I remind you that on December 15th, the Independent Trade Union of the Kuzbas miners declared a pre-strike situation, which still exists today. In order to prevent the unforeseen consequences of spontaneous activities, they created an organizing committee of local strike committees, which presents an entire package of demands to the government. providing Kuzbas with necessary cash, providing large mining regions with food, especially sugar. These issues were discussed today at a meeting of the Russian government, led by Gennady Burbulis, Yegor Gaidar, and Mikhail Poltoranin. They met with representatives of the Kuzbas labor committees and the head of the Kemerovo administration. After the meeting, Mikhail Poltoranin said that the government is giving great attention to the working regions of Vorkuta, Kuzbas, and Tyumen. However, the tactic of taking the government by the throat, which is now being used by labor union functionaries, is unsuccessful. This point of view was also expressed by the chairman of the Council of Workers Committees in Kuzbas, Vyacheslav Golikov, who declared today that we must work with the government and not strike. At the same time, the president of the Council of Strike Committees confirmed that if the government commission does not come, they will begin a strike throughout the Kuzbas on March 10th. The situation is becoming explosive because we are all socially defenseless. Our health care is moving toward paid medical care. This operation is rare. It requires great skill. The surgeons are attempting to correct a defect in the flow of blood within the brain. But our topic today is not scientific news. We're talking about money. In 15 Moscow hospitals, this kind of operation for all residents except for those who live in Moscow would cost 10,000 rubles. Diagnosis and treatment together would cost 20,000. Other hospitals are even more expensive. I don't know whether to say this is good or bad. On the one hand, if it remains free, healthcare will never get out of the hole that it's in. There's no money to buy equipment or medicines or pay the salaries of doctors or nurses. On the other hand, we need, at the first place, to create a system of medical insurance, to start this first, and this will take much time, in my opinion. And then, for example, when this patient, at the age of 59 or 60 years, comes to us for an operation, the insurance company will pay for him, which has taken a lot of money from him in premiums. But what do we do now? Doctors are willing to call things by their names. The situation is terrible, and medicine must be transferred to a paid medical service as soon as possible. Unfortunately, one more gloomy segment from our program about accidents and catastrophes. At the Artyomov mine in the Donbass, an accident has occurred, our correspondent reports. The Artyomov mine is one of the most difficult in the area to extract fuel from. The unstable rock layers, and miners work over 1,000 meters below the surface. In one of these deep shafts, a rock bed collapsed along a great length. The reason for this underground catastrophe is now being investigated by a government commission. 6 workers of the mine are trapped. Their condition is unknown. A brigade of rescuers, along with the most experienced miners, are searching for the victims. As we have been reported to by the Russian Republic Railroad Ministry, at the scene of the railroad accident in Tver region, work is continuing by the government commission investigating the cause of the collision there. Overnight, the number of those killed in the accident was increased to 43. Yesterday's report on 100 deaths was not confirmed. In the hospitals of Tver region, 17 people are in the hospital. 5 more are in the Central Committee Hospital in Moscow. The Railroad Ministry has created a special commission to find and help the relatives of the victims. The telephone number is 262-5209 and 262-5031. Operators are working around the clock. The result of the investigation will be announced by the government commission no later than March 15th. Today, the Russian Federation Commission expresses its deep sympathy to the families and friends of those who died. The Russian State Atomic Oversight Commission has put itself in a doubly difficult position by sending a denial that they have no information on the incident at the 3rd reactor at the Balaklav nuclear power plant. The committee said it simply did not consider it necessary to inform the public because the event presented no danger to the population or the environment. The fire at the Balaklav nuclear power plant happened here at this so-called switching box where electrical equipment is situated along several levels. A spark erupted here and created an electric fire in this small room. This small room was soon filled with smoke, and the fire was put out after 35 minutes. The alarm sounded and the reactor was automatically stopped. It was to be closed entirely in 1 month. How can we increase the reliability of nuclear plant safety? What can international cooperation give us in this area? This was the topic of discussion at a press conference today. At the Balakov reactor number 3, there was an incident which was qualified on the 7-point scale of the International Atomic Energy Agency as a zero-level incident, meaning it presented no danger. Today, the radiation levels in the city are unchanged. And today, a decree was published by the government of the Russian Federation on defending citizens and rehabilitating the victims of the Chernobyl and other radiation catastrophes. The condition of our society is reflected in today's meeting on Red Square, which was devoted to the memory of Stalin. Statistics cannot give a precise number of those killed in the prisons and camps, but in Lubyanka prison, the records were destroyed upon Stalin's death. But between 1935 and 1940 in Lubyanka and its affiliates, 19,840,000 prisoners went through. Of them, 7 million were shot. So this event today can be seen as a rehearsal by forces who hope to return to totalitarianism. Love, faith, and passion, along with hatred and the curses of millions of people, accompanied Joseph Vissarionovich Stalin in life and continue down to today. He died March 5th, 1953, having succeeded by means of unmeasurable sacrifices by our country to free Europe from the fascist plague, in the process enslaving and disgracing his own people. Following his tradition, the name of Stalin was erased for an entire generation. Today, people remembered him. Old and new Stalinists remembered. In Moscow, on Red Square, there were more press people and reporters than those who came to remember the beloved father of peoples. A brief report now on the processes underway in the Army and the Navy. According to the Black Sea Fleet Press Center, the representatives of the Ukrainian Defense Ministry have arrived in Sevastopol. They will meet on Wednesday with the commander of the fleet, Admiral Igor Kasatonov. They also discussed the creation of a Ukrainian Navy in the Black Sea. The press center of the Kiev military district reports that by March 15th, all military forces in the district who have not sworn an oath of loyalty to Ukraine must leave the republic. Of the 5,000 soldiers who have refused to take an oath to Ukraine, over 1,000 have already been sent to Russia and other CIS countries. A delegation from Great Britain arrived in Moscow today. They will provide consultation services to the Russian government as it enters the International Monetary Fund. Several days ago, it was agreed that Great Britain will represent Russia's interests during its entry into the IMF. In Moscow, on March 25 and 26, there will be a large international event, the Congress for Regional Markets in Eastern Europe and Asia. The co-chairmen of the organizing committee are Shevardnadze and Bunich. Is this the latest action or a turning point? In recent days, there have been many international congresses, conferences, symposiums, visits of various levels. We understand they all have one goal: to find support in the West, which we need, but is so far limited to receiving humanitarian assistance and hopes. In Moscow, as we already said, there is a large international event coming up, but the question is, what are you counting on by organizing this latest conference? Is there some new idea for organizing these contacts? It is not the latest Congress because, according to our beliefs, there have been many Congresses. If you take the absolute number, if you count them according to the requirements, there have been very few, and if you count them by their results, there have been almost none. The Eastern European market has been destroyed by two reasons. The first is that the CMEA destroyed it. It did not create it, but destroyed it. And the second reason is the CIS is not working out, so we are also losing our close neighbors. Our countries are connected geographically. And if we lose this chance to work together, we will begin moving backward very soon. The conference hopes to melt this iceberg and move it forward so that public opinion will be moved. So you think the main thing is public opinion. And what about hard currency, which we don't have? We could also have other arrangements like barter arrangements based on hard currency, but without participation of dollars, as we did before. It seems to me there's one more danger on the information area, television and radio. The destruction of these links on the information field will also threaten us with great losses. Do you suppose to consider these issues? Yes, we believe we must maximally unify the information field. We can't break everything down into narrow businesses. We are allies with you here. Thanks for the interview. The foreign ministers of all countries along the Baltic Sea have gathered for a two-day meeting in Copenhagen. They are expected to form a new council for all the Baltic states. The Americans, French, and Canadians, after President Yeltsin's last two trips, have become Russia's friends. But what are our relationships with the rest of the world, at least with our closest neighbors? The session, which opened today in the Danish capital of the foreign ministers of Baltic Sea countries, should determine the depth of feeling between these 10 countries of Northern Europe. They are on various uneven political and economic levels, and they recently stood on opposing sides of ideological barricades. But now we understand that we can become, if not friends, at least comrades, and there's a reason for this. On the one hand, the rich Scandinavian countries and Germany are trying to motivate the former Soviet and socialist camps to abandon their habit of polluting the environment. This clean water in a city of 1 million is worth preserving. There is another purely mercantile reason for this. We can sell them energy resources and buy high technology, and they can cheaply transport their goods and use our still cheap labor force. The mediator in all of this will be the Council of Baltic Sea States, which for the first time in recent years will unify Russia and the Baltic states of the former Soviet Union. The results of the conference will become known tomorrow. In the building of the Finnish Parliament, the 40th session of the Northern Council is underway. We remind you that this organization is made up of Denmark, Iceland, Norway, Sweden, and Finland. The focus here is, as always, the relationship of the Northern Council countries with the European community. They are also discussing the issue of help to the Baltic states, Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia. They have already decided to spend over $100 million on this goal. A Russian delegation was present here as an observer. The fourth round of Arab-Israeli negotiations on the Middle East peace situation is completed. Israel again rejected all proposals for Palestinian autonomy on the occupied territories. The delegations of Syria and Lebanon are also dissatisfied with the results of the negotiations. State Department spokesperson Margaret Tutwiler said, nevertheless, that the atmosphere is hopeful. U.S. Secretary of State James Baker is preparing for his next tour through the Mideast. The events of the recent days in Sarajevo have complicated the situation in other cities of Bosnia and Herzegovina, although the situation in the capital itself is relatively stable. The personal representative of UN Secretary General Cyrus Vance has arrived for negotiations with representatives of the three conflicting sides, the Serbs, Croats, and Muslims. As a result of the explosion at the Turkish mine at the city of Zonguldak, over 300 people are dead. 100 bodies have been taken to the surface so far. The explosion happened after a malfunction in the system to detect flammable gases. Sad news comes today from Great Britain. On March 4th, in one of the hospitals of London, just as he was preparing to have an operation, the great Russian actor Yevgeny Yevstyenkiev died of a heart attack. His fans had recently congratulated him on his 65th birthday. He acted very recently in a Gogol play premiere at the Chekhov Theater. Yevgeny played many roles at the Moscow Art Theater and the Sovramennik Theater. He appeared in over 60 films. But the value of an artist is not measured by the number of films and plays. His name. His name was highly esteemed by professionals and loved by the people. Fate gave me a profession, he said, which I tried always to serve honestly. Fate also gave him talent, which he also tried to use and did use rightly and honestly. He left in our memory love and gratitude. Once more, I have to say, unfortunately, we are taking up the topic in our broadcast of drug abuse and drug business. Only one figure. The use of drugs in our schools has increased 15% over last year. Yesterday, in Moscow, the workers of the Russian Special Services confiscated a shipment of Afghanistan opium intended for sale here. This is an alarming signal. The investigators cannot show us, of course, the faces of the accused criminals, but this specially adapted suitcase, which held 3 kilograms of heroin, was seized by customs agents. It was going from Nepal to Europe, being carried by a Nigerian citizen. It's time to look truth in the eye. The sources of drugs are not running dry and the demand is not falling. Drugs is the most profitable business now. A kilogram of heroin costs $1 million. But our criminal code is abolishing the article calling for penalties for using drugs. It will erase the boundary between the seller and the user. This change in our laws does not seem to be the best antidote to this problem. This change in our law could require us to return illegal drugs to people suspected only of using them. Good evening. The Olympic flame was extinguished in Albertville 11 days ago, and now we still remember about the victories on the ski trails, biathlon trails, and other venues of the Olympics. We, with pleasure, recall the clearest moments of the Olympics. We have an old tradition of welcoming Olympic champions home. Today, the Moscow mayor's office held a reception for our Olympic athletes. 40 Muscovites went to Albertville, and 24 of them came home with gold medals. Today, we should say that in our difficult time, despite their great athletic achievements, it is also important to note their strength of spirit, which the athletes competed in this time on a unified team. The members of the team were given gifts and certificates by the mayor of Moscow. This evening, the Army team played Chelyabinsk Tractors team. The Army team contains many of the Olympic team's players. After the first period, it was a tie, 2-2. But the beginning of the second period was a disaster for the Chelyabinsk team. Within 1 minute and 50 seconds, 3 goals were scored by the Army team, which predetermined the outcome of the game. As in their better days, the Army team was always on the attack and won in the end 10-3. They now have 6 points and lead in their group, which almost assures them of a berth in the semifinals. Now more news about yesterday's soccer play. Kiev Dynamo, as we know, lost to Barcelona in the Champions Cup 2-0. Benfica played Sparta to a tie, 1-1. Barcelona, with 5 points, is in first place in this group. In the other group, the star team from Yugoslavia has 4 points, beating Greece yesterday 2-0. The difficult situation in Yugoslavia apparently does not influence the play of this great team. They won the Champions Cup last year, which was seen as a coincidence. They have now become, almost unexpectedly and unnoticed, one of the strongest teams in European soccer, and they intend to repeat their victory of a year ago. The weather forecast tomorrow: on the middle Volga, 2 to 7 degrees below zero. In the north, 15 to 20 below with light snow. In Volga-Vyatsky region, 13 to 18 degrees below 0 Celsius. On the lower Volga, -1 to +4 with light precipitation. In the northern Caucasus, -1 to +4 with light precipitation. In Murmansk Oblast, -4 to +1 with light snow and snow showers. In Ukraine, 0 to +7 degrees Celsius with light precipitation. In Belarus, +2 to +7 degrees. In Moldova, 2 to 7 degrees above zero. In St. Petersburg, tomorrow, 0 to -2 degrees. And in Moscow, tonight, 7 to 9 degrees below zero. Tomorrow, 1 to 3 degrees below, with ice on the roads and a northeasterly wind.